Serious, women of Reddit, what's the most ridiculous thing you've had to do to get a guy to leave you alone? I had a guy who wouldn't leave me alone at a San Diego trolley station. It was late at night and I was 17 and alone. I walked up to the biggest, scariest looking guy there and pretended like he was my friend. I even gave him a huge hug. Luckily, he immediately understood what was happening and played along with it. After about 2 minutes of me talking to the big dude, the creepy stalker guy left. I thanked the big dude profusely and he was super cool about it. He said I wasn't the first girl he's had to play along with in order to scare off a creeper. Called his grandmother. The story was working at a diner in college after moving back to my hometown. I reconnect with a childhood friend, have some polite conversation but maintain strict boundaries. Then he started showing up at my workplace every single day and hit on me relentlessly. It got to the point where he would come in, buy a coffee or a soda, and then hang out for hours until my shift was over so he could follow me to my car. I wasn't allowed to kick him out of the diner because hey, he's a paying customer and I didn't think I could call the cops. I told him over and over and over again to leave me alone, but of course, nothing. At one point he went into the diner while I was in class, because of course he had memorized my schedule like a creepy little worm, and convinced my boss that he was my cousin and he had to get my phone number from her because our grandmother had had an accident. That was the final straw. I went home, called my great grandma and got her to pull his grandmother's phone number out of her address book. We had a great talk and she put the beat down on him, I guess, because I never saw him again after that. Dang, you know it's serious when grandma gets involved. I got my boss to shout at him. I worked in a Chinese shop just after I left school and this guy showed up every day for weeks begging me to go out with him, telling me how pretty I am, etc. It got to the point where I was afraid to go to work because he'd started to hint that bad things could happen to girls who aren't nice. So I told my boss, using my 2 words of Chinese and a lot of sign language because Wang spoke zero English. And when he came in she started shouting at him in Chinese. I want you to picture the scene. 6-foot black man with muscles on his muscles being chased out of a tiny Chinese shop by an even tinier Chinese lady with a broom who is yelling at the top of her lungs. I'm pretty sure that the sea couldn't have washed him clean of what she said to him. It's a treasured memory to this day. Angry Chinese ladies are absolutely terrifying, and the smaller they are the more terrifying. He made the right decision to flee. After me and my ex broke up he stalked me for 2 years. He would text me every so often and I would be polite and ask him how he was. Then he would start to insult me when I didn't want to hang out with him. He cheated on me with another girl. After getting sick of his random text messages I pretended that it wasn't my number. When he messaged me I said, "Who is this?" He was like, "You know who it is." I replied with, "I just got this number and guys are constantly texting it for this chick named." My ex apologized and I never heard from him again. Block him on eBay. I'd already blocked him everywhere else, but he frigging bid on my auction just so he could declare his love, insist I be his mistress, and promise that his Korean fiancé baby mama really wouldn't mind. That's normal in her culture. Oh, and also accuse me of ripping him off while he was at it, as he didn't actually read the auction text and didn't know the computer I was selling was broken and was missing some parts. eBay. Now that's a stalking medium I haven't heard of before. Okay, this is heavy and I've never told anyone because it makes me feel ridiculous. Anyway, I was at a party in college, out at this girl's house in the middle of nowhere and everyone was drinking. I had too much and needed fresh air and to grab my purse so I went out and sat behind my car. This guy came out and sat next to me. He was in my English class so I knew him but we never really talked. Long story short, he hit on me. I rejected him, and he flipped crap and forced me into my backseat to try to rape me. I was parked far enough away and in the dark so no one saw and he had my mouth covered and all my drunk brain could think was that awful advice of pee yourself and your attacker will be grossed out and leave. So I did. And he had his hand forced down my pants so it got all over his hand. He was pretty grossed out, slapped me with the pee hand, called me a sick BTCH and left. I was too embarrassed to go back and covered in pee so I just left. I drove home drunk and ashamed and crying. Luckily I made it there safe. I took a shower and laughed at myself and cried. So yeah, probably the farthest I've gone to get rid of a guy. It makes me feel ridiculous. Ridiculous nothing. Dude, that was really smart thinking. This guy wouldn't stop texting me after a horrible date. So I sent him a long text about how I couldn't wait to get married because then I could just have a bunch of babies and not have to get a job, and how my only goal in life was to live off my husband's money. He was obsessed with the idea that women only date men for their money. Despite he stopped texting me immediately. I wonder if the buttholes talking about how crazy BR realize that they're really just dealing with women they've pushed to act crazy by being total creepers. Late to this thread, when I was a junior in high school, a friend of mine introduced me to one of his friends. I talked to him every now and then. He said he was interested in me. I politely let him know I didn't reciprocate his feelings. Then the text started. For a few weeks he would text me very explicit things constantly. This was before blocking was a thing. One night my dad saw I was upset and asked me what was wrong. I told him, my dad is a psychiatrist. He can stay alarmingly calm in almost any situation and he's used to dealing with crazy people. So my dad ended up calling this guy and calmly explained to him that he needed to tell his parents about harassing me because the police were going to be showing up at his house soon. The guy started crying and I never heard from him again. I went on a bad date, but the guy wouldn't stop texting me. He was very explicit on how he wanted to have sex with me, how hot I was, describing how he wants to perform BDSM acts on me. For about 2 weeks, I got so fed up when he wouldn't stop asking me for nudes. I just sent him pictures of naked old men, and sometimes of my turds. Needless to say, he no longer texts me. He's too busy jacking off to his 2 newfound fetishes. This was about 8 years ago. I was 17 and volunteered at a nursing home as a part of a high school course. I started talking to one of the older guys that worked there, and pretty quickly had a change of heart. He became obsessive and called non-stop and would leave me upwards of 50 texts in a few hours. So I downloaded this recording that would play as my answering message. It had a trio ascending tones play and the familiar message that went something like, "We're sorry, the number you are trying to reach has been disconnected, etc." I just turned my phone off for a night so that he would hear this message and no ringing. It worked, to my surprise, and I never heard from him again after that. LOL. As soon as you said 3 tones, I heard the message in my head. I had to stop using the front door of my house. I had to start exclusively using my back alleyway, taking it 2 blocks down to the next major road. We lived a town away from each other in a very rural area, so if I heard he was coming into my town from friends, I would call my friend who was old enough to drive and have her pick me up. Driving country roads was the only way he wouldn't bump into me. He would also stop by house, and when my parents told him that I wasn't there, he would camp out in his car waiting for me to come home. I learned quickly that it usually took a couple of hours before he would give up and leave town. This happened a few times a week for a couple of months. Semi-recently, I was at a 24-hour restaurant by myself around 9 or 10 PM. It was the kind of place that had counters with bar stools and free Wi-Fi, with a mix of locals and travelers. At one point I felt watched, and I looked up to see a man staring and smiling at me. I thought maybe I had met him somewhere, so I gave a quick polite smile and resubmerged myself in Reddit and my cheap meal. An hour and a half later, my phone battery died and I paid up and left. Well, he was there, in the parking lot, waiting for me, smiling and waving from his truck and motioning for me to come over. I was shocked and froze mid-step for a couple seconds, but then nervously shook my head no and turned away to unlock my car door. I heard the truck engine start, saw the bright beams of headlights flash on behind me as I quickly hopped in my car, no fiddling with music playlists or air conditioning, and sped out of there. I thought I'd made it clear I wasn't interested, but when I saw a truck speeding along just behind me, I switched lanes just in case, even then thinking I must be paranoid. There were plenty of truckers on the road that night. It probably wasn't him. Full stop. The truck also switched lanes, all the while getting closer. I frantically swerved back to the other lane. So did the truck. By this time he was right behind me, flashing his brights. After that only caused me to speed up. He swerved up next to my car and drove level with me while grinning and jovially waving for me to pull over. He chased me all over the road through town until I turned at full speed without signaling or braking and skidded sideways down a side road, darted into a random driveway, turned off the car and hid crying and shaking for half an hour until I was sure he was gone. I once told a guy at a party that his personality was so disgusting it made me want to vomit. He didn't believe me and continued to hit on me, so I voluntarily vomited on him just to get my point across. This makes me kind of wish that I could vomit on command. It would be so useful for these situations. I went on a date to the beach with this guy and he invited me to his house. We ate some food and afterwards he kissed me. It made me a little uncomfortable, so I told him I had to go and that I had plans. He tried to convince me to stay and then said that I couldn't leave until I said I would be his girlfriend. Red flags are going off, and so I tried to keep the mood very light and started to gather my things while saying things like "Oh, you really like me, hey? That's sweet." I went to leave and suddenly he's in front of me, grabbing my wrists and asking me to be his girlfriend. Yeah, okay bud, whatever you say. I'm your girlfriend now. Unfortunately, he drove, so I told him my parents lived nearby. Not true, and I would just walk there. I really didn't want him to know where I lived at this point. He follows me out into the street, offering me a ride, trying to hold my hand and walk me home. So I just bolt. I broke a flip-flop that day. I think he followed me for a while, but I got far enough ahead of him. It was about 2-hour walk home, so I think eventually he just gave up. It started raining on the way. I remember being in my bathing suit and a dress, holding my shoes, running in the rain and laughing about how much I'd rather be there on the side of the road than in that guy's house for one more minute. We've been dating ever since. JK. I broke up with him over text message when I got home. Apparently, it's not so easy to force someone to be your girlfriend. One time, to get a guy to leave me alone on the bus, I just got really quiet, stared him in the eyes, and went to town picking my nose. The guy always followed and attempted to grope me whenever I tried to go on a simple walk, and even showed up at my doorstep persistently. There was a time when I was actually scared to leave my own house. The idea that I should feel so restricted by just one guy filled me with determination to do something so horrible that he would have no choice but to leave me alone. I shat in a cup and threw it at him. It got all over his shirt and dripped down his front, setting him into a bee panic. Thankfully, I never saw him again. There's a story about the ancient Greek philosopher Hypatia throwing her used menstrual cloth at an unwanted suitor, so at the very least you are backed by history. I've never had a situation where a firm "please leave me alone or I'll take this to the police" didn't work. However, the number of times it's come to that is upsetting. When I was an 18-year-old lifeguard at a family pool, there was this 30-year-old dude who'd come try to talk to me and a few other girls who worked there. He asked me how old I was, and when I said 18 he said, "Oh well, that's a fantastic age." He also then splashed me and said he'd only stop if I gave him my number. He stopped when I got my managers to kick him out. I tell people I have 7 kids, tell them I've been married 4 times, and I have a great relationship with my father. Then they leave me alone. This one guy didn't get the hint. Other ladies will understand that when someone's seriously creeping on you, you have to be polite and courteous because you don't know how fricked up this guy is. If he isn't respecting your boundaries, who knows what he will respect. So I had a guy follow me off of my train into my apartment. I couldn't just walk or run away because I had a bike with a flat tire, and it was 45-40C, 115-120F. I'm just not athletic enough to deal with that. So I politely entertained conversation, hoping that at one point he'd take a turn that I didn't have to. He asked me how old I was, and when I lied he questioned me, touched my face and said, "Ick now, you look a lot younger than 22. You don't got any lines." Then he asked if I went to the gym, and again, I lied. Then he touched my stomach and complimented how flat I was, saying I probably didn't even need to go to the gym. Keep going. Get to my apartment complex and I get my bike into the gate. Then myself and he steps in between the gate and its latch. I can't close it. He starts asking for a way to contact me, and he goes through the list. Phone number, I'm too poor for a phone. Facebook, I don't own a PC either. What about an email? Never have time to check. Which apartment are you in? Oh, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Oh, I just kinda go to the door. I never really check the number. Haha, my boyfriend deals with the mail, haha. He turns for a moment and I push him, shove the gate closed, and even though my apartment was to the left, I went right and stayed right for a while. I circled around my complex, waited a bit, made sure he was gone, and then half an hour later, went home. I wish I could say this was the first time this kind of crap happened. Changed my number. Doesn't seem that bad, but I had to pay to change my number because some butthole wouldn't stop texting me several times a day, all day, and calling all the time. Hey, I had to change my number and deactivate my Facebook for about a year in college because an butthole former friend put it on 4chan. He kept writing me texts saying crap like, "Baby, we were meant to be together. If you give me a chance, please baby," which is douche code for, "I want to frick you. Why won't you let me?" So I acted like a crazy person and sent him the lyrics to Bob Dylan's Changing of the Guards and gave him an in-depth analysis on how these lyrics were a sign from some great cosmic being, and made up bulls about how I found connections in the lyrics to our new relationship. He totally fricked off after that and never sent me another message. It was fun though. I totally recommend everyone act crazy when dealing with crazy. That could be dangerous though. You never know how deep the crazy well goes. I've had to make hand signals for male co-workers so that when customers are being too aggressive I can flash it at my co-workers and they'll know to come and save me. I've also had to have my girlfriend pretend to be my girlfriend while out dancing one night so a guy would leave me alone. I've tried the girlfriend thing, but it's only had the reverse effect. Guys just get more interested because they have a chance of seeing two girls make out. Ugh. Change my license plates. Met a guy who told me his friend follows around my car because a cute blonde drives it. Word of advice: never get personalized license plates. I borrowed my sister's car one night to go to work the shift and come out to a note under the windshield wiper. It was a love note about how he had seen my sister before on the freeway and how they had both gone in and out of the lanes beating traffic with such, seriously, spiritual synchronicity that he just knew they were meant to be. Dudes are weird. Glad I have a penis. There was a guy in one of my freshman classes who would stare at me all during class. The desks were arranged in such a way that half were facing the front of the room, and the other half were facing the opposite wall. This gave us a very clear view of one another. I had a gravity storm while I was walking down the stairs one day and somehow ended up with an impressive gash in the side of my leg. The guy saw the wound the next day and asked me what happened, and the day after that, he came up to my desk and said he had something to show me. He pulled up his pant leg to reveal a cut that was in the exact same spot as mine, as well as of a similar length. He told me he had done it for me. This was at the very beginning of the semester, and for the rest of the year I was extremely vigilant about only looking straight ahead in that class so as not to make eye contact with him. I pretty much never saw the left side of my world events classroom. Have my friend do recon on my favorite bar to make sure creepy dude wasn't in it. Then when the dude did approach my friend and said I fricked him over, my friend gave him a verbal lashing. He's still creepy, but he doesn't bug me. I'm very small so I'm honestly shocked I haven't had to be more aggressive. I'm also extremely loud. Maybe that helps. I got followed, so I walked to the police station and sat in the lobby. I had a co-worker who did prison ministry, and, OMG, did she have to deal with creeps. They would find out where she worked and call us all the time. It's like, FFS, just leave her alone. I'm a big fan of saying how would your mother feel if she heard you talking acting like that. It usually shuts them up because they realize their mother wouldn't be proud. I made a fake profile for a 50-year-old businessman with all my contact info to prove to him that I wasn't the girl he was interested in. He had taken my personal information from a logbook at a church event. To be a teenager again. Every time I have to get another man involved to help me. That doesn't seem that ridiculous, but it is. It should not take more than me saying no. A guy in line at a concert grabbed my crotch and when I said don't touch me he blew up, threatening to get me kicked out of line. How he was just having a good time until I was a B and didn't stop until his own friend said dude, leave her alone. A couple weeks ago I was at a bar and a man I had not interacted with at all came up behind me and pulled my ponytail so hard my head cranked back. When I said don't freaking touch me he tried to hit me. 3 other men had to drag him out of the bar. A couple weeks before that I found a man none of us knew trying to get my incredibly blacked out, we believe her drink was drugged, friend into his car, and actually argued with me that he knew her and would give her a ride until a male friend shoved him away. I have more stories than anyone should have. Having one story is more than anyone should have. I'm sorry you, and everyone in this thread, had to and has to deal with this. Sometimes I wear a fake wedding ring. I stared because several men have grabbed my hand looking for a ring, and felt the absence of one meant I should definitely frick them. Sadly, it's easier to pretend I belong to someone else than it is to get some people to understand that I just don't want to talk to them, let alone frick them. I play a lot of Xbox. I once had a guy constantly messaging me, so I told him I have both male and female parts. I never heard from him again. I'm a guy but I made a female character in Destiny for fun and that was enough for random friend requests out of nowhere. Xbox kids are pretty thirsty. Once, this boy cornered me at school and had his friends surround me so I couldn't run away. He kept grabbing me and calling me his blow-up doll. Stuff like that. Anyway, I told my dad about it, and he showed up to the kid's house in full uniform. He was a state trooper, and had a talk with the kid and his dad about it. The next day, the kid apologized to me repeatedly and told me he'd only done it because I'm so very beautiful. He promised to never ever talk to me again. And he kept his word. All those years we lived in the same tiny town and he avoided me like the plague. I called my brother to meet me at the bus stop, which was a pretty good hike from the house, because he was gonna follow me off the bus. Thank goodness for brothers. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.